It's Saturday morning, time to kick off the Experts program, and our tech expert, Luis Alvarez, joining us right now on Power Talk Radio, 1460 and 101. Luis, welcome to the weekend.
Thank you, my friend. It's excited. We're getting Car Week started off this week, and it's going to be a crazy week for Monterey, as it always is.
Yes, in fact, Car Week kind of started yesterday on the 11th with the display of classic race cars on Alvarado Street, and then Pasadena had their concours. So things got going on the 11th, and they're going to run all the way through the 20th.
It's going to be a grand time, and be patient out there when you're driving around, because there's some really expensive cars you don't want to run into.
Hey, I want to just make a mention of something that we're going to talk about on Monday's program starting at 8:30, and that's about Disney is going to be raising the price of Hulu and ESPN and Disney Plus, and they're also going to start a password or account sharing crackdown a la Netflix within the next year. So that's something that we're going to talk about. But the other thing that you and I had talked about when we recorded the Monday program was that ESPN's plan is to go to a full streaming model where they're going to let their carriage contracts with cable systems expire, and then the only way that you're going to be able to buy ESPN, and this is down the line, it's not happening today or tomorrow, but it's a few years down the line, but their plan is to become like Sling or others where it's solely going to be a streaming model, and they see that as the way forward to more profits.
Yeah, and like a lot of folks that started on cable that have moved on to streaming, HBO Max is an example where most of their money now comes from the streaming service, not necessarily from subscribers to their cable channels, because it's a much more lucrative thing. They control the price of that, as opposed to having to negotiate with dozens of cable carriers, if not hundreds, across the country and negotiate a cut of their profits. So it's an easier model for them, and one that's going to bring more money in as far as they're concerned. So that makes their stock price higher.
Right. And the streaming model isn't without pitfalls. Just recently, the Pac-12 conference, famous for football and basketball, the home of schools like Stanford and Oregon and Washington and California, UCLA, USC, that conference broke apart over an issue of streaming only for their football games and their athletic contest. And the proposal that Apple had brought forward to the Pac-12 last week was for a payment somewhere between 20 and 25 million, a base payment for each of the schools per year for their grant of rights. But the way they were going to get more money than that, and you might say that, wow, 20, 25 million is a lot of money, but when Ohio State and Michigan are getting $75 million a year, 20 million isn't going to do it to keep up with the Joneses in the hyper-competitive world of big-time college athletics. So one of the presidents of a Pac-10 institution, Arizona's president, said the idea of not being on linear TV was not appealing to us at all, and the fact that to get more money, say up to 50 million, we would have to have 5 million subscribers from Seattle to Tucson, and they just felt that that was undoable, that they looked at what the NFL's Sunday ticket, with all the heft of the NFL, I think they have something like 800,000 subscribers. So they looked at that and said, hey, wait a minute, the NFL is only able to get 800,000 subscribers across 50 states. We're in 4 states. How are we going to get 5 million? This is going to be like having a Girl Scout cookie or a bake sale type of thing, enticing people to subscribe. So they walked away from that offer from Apple, and subsequently the conference broke apart because the schools like Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado took an offer to go to the Big 12 conference, and then, Oregon and Washington went to the Big 10, and that leaves 4 schools without a home right now. But just to show that streaming only is not always the panacea that some people present it as.
Yeah, exactly. And there's still more upset to come in this whole streaming world, because the market has become saturated, and all these streaming companies are trying to figure out how to make more money without adding more subscribers, because they've maxed out on what they can penetrate.
Along the line, somebody's going to come up with this. Well, basically a service like Sling is like a bundler of streaming services, right? So you might see more of that. Anyway, let's go on to a couple other topics here. Tesla's $40,000 electric car. Is it really a bargain now that the price has been slashed 6 times?
Yeah. So one of the things that really is interesting, speaking of cars and Car Week, is the fact that for the first time in California's history, the first half of the year, we had almost a quarter of all the new cars sold were either EVs or hybrids. And a lot of that is because Tesla has been very aggressive about dropping the price of their best-selling, Model 3 car, which already was the cheapest car in their inventory, but now it's available for under $40,000, which makes it competitive with a traditional high-end vehicle that with a gasoline engine. And so that's led to this surge of EVs in the marketplace. And you have a lot newer or a lot more manufacturers now out there. I mean, I'm seeing more and more cars on the road from companies like Lucid and Ioniq and even Kia and the Volkswagen's ID4, their SUV. I've seen a lot of them on the road in and around Monterey County. So I suspect that we're going to continue to see more electric vehicles on the road, especially with that $7,500 federal rebate kicking in force later this year. So Tesla is just goosing the engine, if you will, by lowering the cost of their Model 3.
All right. And like you said, 25% of all new cars sold in California right now are EVs. Earlier this week, we saw a story in the news that Tesla's in trouble for faking. They falsified some of the mileage estimates on their EVs. Do you think this is going to have any sort of backlash for them?
I don't think so in the short term. People who buy EVs understand that the range that they get isn't an exact science. In some cases, it's a little more. In some cases, it's a little less, depending on how you drive and when you drive. And since the majority of people plug their cars in overnight, they do their own charging at home, they don't really worry during typical commutes. The only time they ever are concerned about range is if they're going to go up to Tahoe, for example, or down to LA, or gotta look at your car and say, okay, where are the places that I'm going to stop between here and there to find a supercharger that I can charge up my car in 10 or 20 minutes. But it does just add another black eye to Tesla and the fact that not everything they claim is necessarily true. They've been talking about having a self-driving car. They were predicting they'd have it by now, and it's still pretty far away. Nobody expects to see a Tesla self-driving vehicle anytime in the near future, but you never know.
Well, the other thing too, Louis, is if we go back to thinking about the CAFE standards for internal combustion engine cars, how often are those estimates that are on the windows actually accurate? That you get that? Like you'd buy a car and it would say 24 and 30. And good luck trying to get that 30 on the highway, because it seems that most of the time...
Never worked for me.
Yeah, it never worked for me either. It seems that most of these things are, based on flat ground. Like, what did they take it? Take it down to Southern California, somewhere out in eastern Riverside County, where the land is flat, and that's where they did the testing or something. So, the fact that the electric cars don't get exactly as many miles as they promised or they said they would doesn't surprise me at all, because this has been a gambit of the automotive industry that's gone on since the introduction of those CAFE standards.
Yeah, absolutely. Just be happy your car works when you turn the key on.
Well, and you know what else that shows you? What it actually shows you is that Tesla's learning how to be a real car company.
Yeah, they're now selling as many cars as Ford or some of the smaller traditional companies, excluding trucks. I think Ford still beats them on trucks, but Tesla is a real competitor. And like you said, they've grown up. And now that Elon Musk isn't necessarily involved in the day-to-day management, and he's leaving the adults to run the company, it seems to be running a lot better.
Well, yeah, visionaries aren't good at day-to-day operations.
Yeah, that's for sure.
They're great at coming up with the next big idea, but they really don't understand how to implement it or keep it running. So it's good for him that he realized his limitations and he's going to step back from it.
Yeah, and I think it's good for the industry too that Tesla has really matured and brought a lot of new technologies and awareness into electric vehicles into the marketplace, and that's why you have everybody else is jumping on the bandwagon. And I think that turn has happened where we're going to see more and more EVs.
All right. Well, that's Luis Alvarez, CEO of the Alvarez Technology Group, joining us today here on Power Talk. Online, it's alvareztg.com, @AlvarezTG. That's their Twitter handle. And Luis, the toll-free number for the I-Team.
Give us a call at 866-78-I-Team. That's 866-784-8326.